You are listening to the Spiritual Warrior Coach with Barbara Savin, the podcast for discovering how powerful your wisdom, compassion, and courage is. Get ready to join Barbara and her guests as they explore and offer you advice on how to reclaim your power, your energy, and your authentic self. And now, here's the host of the show, Barbara Savin.
Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the Spiritual Warrior Coach podcast. I am your host, Barbara Savin, and I am here to help you reclaim your power, your energy, and your authentic self. And I am a certified clinical and medical hypnotherapist. I am a Reiki master and teacher, an energy healing specialist, life coach, and best-selling author of Gentle Energy Touch, The Beginner's Guide to Hands-on Healing. You know, I have been helping my clients for over 35 years, and the older I get, the more wisdom seems to come through. So isn't it time that you believe in yourself? Your mind is going to provide you with your greatest challenges in life because it's so very, very powerful. So let's use it for positive thinking, creating harmony, balance, peace, love, happiness, and anything else that your heart desires. Because one day the world will tap you on your shoulder and say, this is your time to shine. And speaking about shining, I'm going to bring on my guest right now while I introduce her. Hello, Geraldine. How are you?
I'm very well, Barbara. How are you?
Good, good. Well, Gendreau, right? Did I pronounce it right?
Gendreau.
Oh, Gendreau. Okay. Is a licensed psychotherapist since 1995. Geralyn is a playful, soul-provoking life coach who helps people discover the joy that is our natural state. She is also an author, editor, ghostwriter, and writing coach with a 20-year track record in publishing. And Geralyn's approach to personal growth draws heavily from the work of her mentor, Jean Liloff, author of the child-rearing classic, The Continuum Concept. And Geralyn helps people who did not have a fully enriched infancy and childhood. She helps them understand the impact of what Liloff term missing experiences and gain the courage to fully actualize life. Geralyn also works with clients to dissolve their self-defeating patterns and turn wasted energy into creative juice so that they can both reach their personal and professional goals. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you today?
I'm really well. It always gives me a tickle when people read what people pick from that excessively long bio to share.
Oh, I know. I said, wow, there is a lot of information here. And wow, you've had some life. And I was also reading that you had a near-death experience.
Can
you tell my listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was 1987. So I was 29 at the time. And so it was a very formative life experience. So the backstory, I was a bartender down on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. And I used to walk out of the restaurant with a lot of cash in my pocket. And I got nervous about that. And a friend said, well, come to my martial arts class with me. So I thought, perfect. So I became obsessed. I went every single day for several years. I was training for my black belt test and decided I should go on a vision quest. I live in Northern California. People do vision quests, like other people mow the lawn, you know? So, so we traveled. I went with a friend who also worked at the restaurant, and we traveled up to Point Reyes National Seashore in Northern California and hiked 5 miles out Bear Valley Trail to Arch Rock and then went north to Kellam Beach. So spent a whole afternoon in the beautiful sunshine, hot and sunny. Back in those days, you probably remember Bain de Soleil, that orange tanning cream that was like Vaseline texture. So I'd slathered myself with that, and I was doing katas and, you know, doing sprints up and down the beach. And so it was time to go back. I hadn't had any visions. It was a little disappointing, but I just decided to run into the ocean and cool off. So I had grown up in Southern California, body surfed my whole life, but Southern Cal, it's the Santa Barbara Channel. There's islands out there, it's not the open ocean. Northern California is completely different. The continental shelf drops off abruptly. So the way the waves come in is completely different. And I basically ran in thinking I'd dive through the curl like I had thousands of times before. And the wave crashed right in front of me. And I ducked and it hit me head on. Oof. Crushed C3, fractured C2 and C4. That makes a sound you do not imagine you're going to survive. And so my very first thought was, so that's how it ends, which had always been a big question for me. And then I went through this like rolling, this was the part that was so stunning. Well, there are many parts of the story that were very stunning, but I went through this like rolling recognition that answered all the questions I ever had. Wow. I remember like in my head saying, so that's, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. Like just expanding my awareness until I was like one with whatever it is up there, nameless, beyond time, space, pure consciousness, and everything made sense, perfect sense. And then I went through the life review thing. It was a bit odd. People describe it different ways. For me, it was like a gestalt, like everything happened all at once. And what was most present were the times when I had hurt other people. And in that encounter, for me, it was like I call it a karmic wave. Like, what if karma is actually when you have to experience who you are from other people's perspective? And again, it's outside time and space. So at one point I was reliving the moment that I caused a person the most pain I'd ever caused another person, human being. And it was my mother when I was 16 and she wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do. And I was screaming at her, I hate you, F you, just with the hatred. And I'm experiencing that from inside her body, from inside my brother's bodies upstairs, listening to me, from inside my father's consciousness when she told him late that night on the phone because he was on a business trip. And I'm feeling all of this. And then I'm feeling her future self. I'm feeling what it would be like to be in her body at 4:00 that afternoon, getting the call that I had died.
Oh, wow.
And it was only a year since my father had passed of cancer. And my thought was, I can't die now. Literally, I can't die now. And then I went to the surface, gasped for breath, started screaming for help. Long story short, there was a whole process whereby I got rescued and I was passed out pretty much and laid there for a bit going, am I alive or dead? I must be alive. Yeah, there's my hand. I can see my hand, but my hand won't move. What? My hand won't move, and the impact of that recognition that I was paralyzed was more powerful than the impact of the wave, because that had actually always been my deepest fear. So here I was experiencing my deepest fear, terrified, and it was as though reality just ripped. And you might remember, I had this experience that very similar to what happens in the movie The Matrix when Keanu Reeves or Neo and Morpheus are in the construct. So it's like they're in this place that's all white and there's nothing there. And I'm just in this white construct. And then 3 movie screens appeared. And the first one was my funeral, my brother's standing around my grave, and it was kind of fading out. Like that was a potential future that had passed. I was alive. The one in the middle was right there in front of me, the most clear, and it's me sitting in a wheelchair with this very short haircut that I had at the time. And then that was right there. And so that was the most likely future at that moment. And then in the third movie screen was this woman with long blonde hair spinning in circles and whipping her head around on stage. Needless to say, I picked door number 3. And I did go on to do, for years, I was performing Rumi poetry on stage.
Oh, wow.
There's actually a video on YouTube. If you search Rumi's Wedding Night, Geralyn, you'll see me doing exactly what I saw in that vision, spinning and twirling and my hair going right. Anyway, so I had that vision, and then my friend who'd rescued me this was the part I think of as a divine intervention, because she's standing there looking at me, realizing I'm paralyzed. And the thought she said, that she has this thought like, oh my God, she's going to hate me for pulling her out if she can't never move again. And then she had this thought that came in. She said it was like a voice came in and said, you have to make her move, not move her, but make her move. And she stood up, stood over my paralyzed body and started to scream. She, like at the top of her lungs, with all the force of her being, with the force of it was like a power greater than herself, spoke through her, and with a command, just with an authority that she didn't actually have. So it was a higher authority. And it's like my body understood what that meant to crawl. And I started to creep and crawl up the sand and kind of went through evolution as though I were the first amphibian to crawl out on the sea. Out of the sea, and went through the stages of creeping and crawling that an infant goes through. And it's the best explanation I can have for why I'm not paralyzed is that my spinal cord kind of reconfigured itself just the way an infant does in the womb. And because the next day when the orthopedist saw my x-ray, he looked at it and he said, I had crushed C3 and fractured C2 and C4.
Wow.
And he looked at it and he said, there's no way you could be walking. I walked into his office. Anyway, the thing that is most significant about this whole entire experience is actually what led me to Jean Lidloff, the woman who wrote this, the woman whose biography I just wrote. And that was that once I hit the warm sand, I like crawled up into a fetal position, and it was though I had just been given birth to by the universe itself, by the ocean. And the entire universe was an ocean of love. I felt surrounded by this powerful, loving force, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And my thought was, I felt completely at home in my skin, no tension anywhere in my body. And the thought was, this is how I'm supposed to feel. This is who I truly am. And it was like pulsing, just pulsing. And then the very next thought was, why haven't I ever felt this way before? Like, if this is who I truly am, like this isn't right. And that question, why haven't I ever felt that way before, became my driving, my reason to be. Like, and it has fueled and propelled me through everything in my life since, really. Trying to find my way, trying to find out, answer the question, why haven't I felt that way before, which Jean's book, it really lays out. She lived in the Amazon rainforest with the indigenous people there back in the 50s and 60s. They had never seen white people.
Wow.
And no exposure to civilization. And the way they treat their infants and children is very, very different than we do in the West. Her book, The Continuum Concept, actually inspired the baby wearing trend. The attachment parenting movement, all of that came out of her work and or her story, really. So and those infants don't have the kind of self-doubt, identity confusion, anti-self feelings. They don't struggle like we do, like, who am I, what am I, why am I here? They don't, because they got what evolution prepared them to receive. We didn't evolve for 7 million years, hominid evolution, to be put in a crib and left to cry ourselves to sleep in the other room. We never would have survived. So it's like our biology, our physiology is programmed. Jean used to call them innate expectations for appropriate treatment, to be held on mother's body, to sleep between the parents, which these days would be scandalous. But imagine if they're in the cave with mommy and daddy, of course, that's where they're going to be. That's how they stay safe. That's how they stay warm. The whole family, the family bed is another very controversial part of her work. But it's, it's growing in understanding. And in this book, in Jean's story, so I retell her whole story. You get her whole life. The book spans the entire 20th century, because she was born in, I think, 2027 or something, and died in 2011. And she was born in 1927 and died in 2011.
Right.
She asked me on her deathbed to write her biography. It's a crazy story. She was a Manhattan socialite who ran.
I was going to ask, how did you meet her?
So I'd had this question after my near-death experience. That was 1987. I went to graduate school. like a lot of people who go into psychology, I was trying to figure myself out. And I finished school. I hadn't figured it out. I was working in a drug and alcohol treatment facility in San Francisco. That was a family reunification program. So it was moms who had their children had been confiscated by Child Protective Services. They'd been, what do they call it? Whatever they call it, removed from the home.
Wow.
And this was a way for them to regain custody of their children by living with their kids in milieu in a treatment facility. And I was a resident manager, and we had this parenting manual. And the parenting manual made no sense to me. I was like, what do you mean mom can't lay down with her crack baby who's screaming, like she can't breastfeed? Like that just didn't make any sense to me. And I understand it from the framework that they existed in. Like a lot of these women were sexually abused as children. They had their own abuse. They had boundary issues. So it made sense in that context. But my body was like, nah, So I couldn't uphold the manual. So I had to quit. And I read a book by Riane Eisler. You've probably heard of it, The Chalice and the Blade. I was very thrilled. She endorsed this book. She knew Jean's work. She was one of the stepping stones that got me to Jean, because her book, The Chalice and the Blade, is about ancient matriarchal cultures where they had all the goddess figurines, and it was a society based on cooperation and joy, and very, very different than our culture. And I was reading that, and I was like, I need to find, what did their parenting manual say? So I was joking with a friend, and I said, I need to find a time machine, go back and see what they did with their kids. She goes, oh, you don't need a time machine, just read this. And she handed me Jean's book.
Wow.
And it blew my mind. I cried. I read it 2 or 3 times. And then I was like, how do I find this woman? I tracked her down, and turned out she lived in Sausalito. So I lived in the city at the time. I'd ride my bike across the Golden Gate Bridge and hang out with her, and go to the Depot Cafe in Mill Valley for lunch, at least twice a week. And then I became her personal assistant, started a nonprofit for her, and, knew her over a period of 15 years. It was a very difficult relationship, and I spare no, I tell the whole story in here. She was an expert in relationships, correct, proper bonding, but she had real issues, and she played them out with me. She told me the first day we met that she actually said to me, not the first day, but the first time we had lunch together, she said to me, she always called me Pussycat or Darling, never Geralyn. It was always Pussycat or Darling. She'd say, Darling, there's something I always do that pushes people away. I don't know what it is. I ruined my relationship with Gloria Steinem, and I don't know what I do. I do it all the time. Promise me you won't leave. You just don't let me push you away. Just tell me what I'm doing. Tell me what I do. Nobody's been able to help me. I help all these people. By then she was a counselor and parenting coach, people around the world, but she could not figure out her own, I call it the blind spot. And so that's actually kind of a subplot in the book. And in the end, I went through a lot of searching my own soul and my own being, noticing that other people seem to have this blind spot. At one point I started a women's group, thinking that if women sat in a circle, we could tell each other, yeah, this is how you're shooting yourself in the foot, because I could see how all my women friends were doing it, but I couldn't see what I was doing. And unfortunately, it kind of devolved into a goddess group where everybody just sat around and, we'd get on the hot seat and say, this isn't working in my life. Oh, but goddess, you're so beautiful. It's like very Northern California. And didn't work. So I didn't have skillful means, but eventually I met someone who did have skillful means. And I really started to understand that these fixations in the personality that most people have, they have a way where they go into their not self. They go into the negative ego and act in ways that are counterproductive and don't serve their highest good or that of people around them. And once I discovered mine, it became easier and easier for me to understand myself and help other people discover their blind spot and understand them. It changes everything.
And were you able to help Jean?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
At the end of her life, on her deathbed,
wow,
she recognized it. The way she would, I'll tell you, it's funny, I haven't actually told this story on any of the podcasts I've been on, but And by the way, Gloria Steinem endorsed this book. She's my first endorsement, and right on the cover, I was very proud of that. I got to talk to her. I had to really work to get to her, but I talked to her about her relationship with Jean because I wanted her side of the story. And there's an appendix in there about that. But what was I lost my train of thought. What was important? What was it? Oh, so the way hers showed up, I'll give you an example. It's in here somewhere. I could actually read it to you.
Yes, please.
She would. This
Wow.
is so funny, Barbara. I love where this is going because I haven't talked about this that much in all the podcasts I've done. Let me see. It was so this is just one example. I wrote another book that had just come out at the time. It was an anthology. And okay, here we go. This is so funny. Okay, this is actually several of them. This is a scene when we're at the Mill Valley Cafe. So, oh, okay. Okay, so I kept that promise for 12 years, the promise not to go away, even though she pushed me away a lot. I saw this behavior over and over. Sure, we had the occasional falling out, but we always managed to slog our way through rough terrain. Per her request, I attempted to point out her off-putting behavior several times. One such attempt occurred while we ate lunch on the outdoor patio at the Depot Cafe. As was our habit, we sat at the edge of the fenced-in patio right near the square. I loved to watch the comings and goings of all the lovely people, especially a group that often gathered to practice capoeira, a Brazilian martial art dance form. Meanwhile, Jean loved watching the children. Whenever she saw a mom making a fruitless attempt to get her child to obey, Jean would walk up to her, apologize for the intrusion, pull out one of the reviews and comments booklets. She always carried that in her purse. She had rave reviews for her book, and she'd say, "You might find this of interest." Then she would offer a knowing smile and walk away. Jean didn't need to look at the menu. She always ordered a turkey sandwich. I, on the other hand, liked variety. I took a few moments to consider my options and decided on a taco salad. She waved to the waiter, a Latino man she knew by name, and ordered our lunch in perfect Spanish. Then she launched into a not atypical critique of my appearance. "Darling, you really shouldn't go out of the house without mascara," she said, "and your upper lip is so thin. You really must use a liner before you put on lipstick." I didn't bother to argue, but I like going au naturel. I just shook it off with a little humor. "What? You don't like the lipless wonder look?" Over the years, Jean had taken it upon herself to critique me on everything from my style of dress to my choice in men. I always did my best to be gracious. I even managed to brush it off the day she clipped me at the knees after my first book signing and public talk in San Francisco. That morning, I decided to wear an outfit that was less marin casual and more city chic. Deciding to go all black, I put on a short skirt and black turtleneck with fetching boots and fishnet stockings. Jean had invited me to stop by her houseboat on my way back home to San Rafael. I pulled into the parking lot at Issaquah Dock, feeling quite pleased. The book signing had gone smoothly. My nervousness had vanished as soon as I'd stepped up on the microphone. Eager to share this with Jean, I rapped her brass knocker. She opened the door, looked me up and down, and said, "You look like a tart." And here I was so proud of myself for wearing a sweater that didn't show my cleavage. Before bringing our meal, the waiter dropped off the standard basket of chips and salsa that comes with a taco salad. I was unusually hungry and dove in straight away. I hadn't munched down 2 of the salty chips when Jean swiped at me like a cornered alley cat. "Stop crunching!" Her words were sharp and definitive. They stung as if she had indeed reached across the table and scratched me, breaking the skin and leaving tiny drops of blood. "Jean, they're tortilla chips," I said, bewildered. She gave me a look of scorn and shook her head, almost imperceptibly saying, "Naughty girl," with her eyes. My appetite ran out into the square and hid behind the redwood tree. I sat in my chair, eyes cast down, vaguely aware that it had happened again. I excused myself to go to the bathroom to lick my wounds. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face my face host to the twisted look of a little girl who'd been chastised without cause. I vowed to say something, to let her in on the effect her caustic statement had on me, the fact that it had killed a perfectly pleasant mood. I knew better than to do so while actually showing my hurt, a demonstration she despised. I stiffened my nearly non-existent upper lip, walked back out to the table, and sat down. Jean, I would appreciate it if you would refrain from criticizing me so much. First, it's my makeup, then the way I chew my food. Tortilla chips are crunchy, for the love of God. It's not like I was chewing with my mouth open. It doesn't feel good to be scolded like that. I took a breath and said, that's the type of treatment that makes me want to go away. You're being too sensitive, she said. There it was, again, dismissal of any feedback. A short puff of breath, almost a snort, came from the back of my throat. Fortunately, she was looking at her plate and did not see me shake my head from side to side. We ate our meal, Jean joking, while I sat nibbling my taco salad in silence. She was truly unaware that anything had happened.
Wow. So she didn't have feelings towards hurting others.
She didn't. That was this blind spot behavior that kept her from having relationships. There were very few people. I was really the only one that stayed. I was there for, she asked me to write her biography on her deathbed, and she stopped eating. She couldn't get out of bed anymore. And she said, life's not worth living bedpan to bedpan. And she chose to stop eating and starve herself to death. So I sat at her bedside for those 40 days. And during the last week, I explained to her about the blind spot work. We got to a point where at some point, shortly after this incident, I talked to her about this behavior when we weren't in the middle of it. And we agreed that we'd have a code word for it. And that was, where's Gloria? That was like the code word, that would be like, hint, hint, you're doing it.
Doing it. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I ever used it, but on her deathbed, it was the day she asked me to write her biography. She said, you be my Boswell. I had no idea who Boswell was. He's a famous biographer who wrote, I think it's James Adams or one of those guys, biography. And I went, Boswell? And she looked at me and she goes, you truly are an idiot. And because I had done my blind spot work by that point. So I didn't do what I would ordinarily do, which is go upstairs and get some cookies or push back or, get somehow offended and angry. I just looked at her and said, ouch. One word, ouch.
Wow.
And she got it.
She got it.
She said, deadpan, where's Gloria?
Wow. So she understood.
It was the first time she was able to see her own blind spot.
Her own blind spot.
I've just got goosebumps even just telling you the story. So yeah, it was all very profound, and it's actually a big part of this story. We get to see what happened to her as an infant, her life, her family story. It's all part of this biography. So
was she abused as a child or?
Well, gosh, I could give you another example. Can I read one more little passage?
Oh, you can read all you want.
Her mother was horrible. So let me see. There's one part. It started from the time she came out of the womb. And it's an interesting thing because most people don't have much memory at all before they're 5. And if they do have memory, it's because something is either so surprising or so shocking, often abuse, but often just something unusual. Like I know somebody whose earliest memory, my ex, actually, his earliest memory was when his mom sent him down to buy the bread for the first time because he was old enough for her to hand him the money. She had a newborn and she's like, will you please go? And that's the earliest memory, is being sent to buy bread. But the long-term memory tags events that are completely novel like that. So she was born, let me just find, I'm looking it's easier than farting around with the book itself and looking through the pages. It was, here we go. So this is from her journal. I did have her journals available, so I'll read you the paragraph that comes through it. This is one of the early chapters. Jean was never truly convinced that this is when she had, boy, so many rich passages in here, if I say so myself. So she had gone to live with her grandmother, Darling, everyone called her, who lived in the Upper West Side, Manhattan, ran a business, the Fan Company, and was quite gracious all the time. So Jean was never truly convinced that she would not be returned to the dreadful dark place, the apartment somewhere in Manhattan where she'd spent an eternity with her mother before the notion of passage of time entered her mental development. To her child's mind, it was just the way things are for me. Later, as an adult who'd become an expert in mother-infant bonding, she would often reflect on the fact that she felt unworthy and unwelcome. That feeling had been instilled in her by her mother's first dictum when Jean was presented to her in the delivery room. In her journal, she wrote, "After my struggle toward the light, my birth, my severance from her body, my being mishandled and cleaned up by strangers in preparation for the momentous presentation, Mother turned from me in disgust and bid the servile nurse, toglo in disturba, an Italian expression that meant remove the disturbance. As was ordained, I was immediately removed from her sovereign presence and taken to a place where I would not offend anyone, i.e. isolation, a room, I think, where there were instruments and tables, but no people. Empty, silent, but I did not willingly retire. I cried, I screamed, I wanted, I could not give up. It seemed life and death to me." This goes on for a bit.
Wow.
"And every succeeding, life or death to me, the silent abyss, the shock and trauma that branded a template unwelcome into my unformed mind. And every succeeding moment of my life was lived in reference to my mother's offhanded pronouncement. How to escape it? What do I have to do to bluff my way a little longer? How could mommy be made right so that she could maybe later somehow be fulfilled, made happy? If only she would dress better, be nice to Darling, be in, not out, of what I wasn't even sure. All I knew is that my mother mocked me for wishing to be one of those confident girls in parades who marched to the drum beat, strutting in white uniforms with gold braids and buttons. It was clear to me those girls had something." And then there's Jean's, Jean's writing trailed off as if she was unable to finish the thought. At every moment, Jean had to make an effort to prove she was blameless, to make excuses for her presence, to win games, show valor, merit, wit, strength, humor, virtue, fairy tale values, not so much to gain recognition as to evade being recognized as an imposter in a world full of the right people. Never, of course, did she put any of this into words and form a clear thought as a youngster. She was only able to do so in retrospect when, as an adult, she remembered the constant anxiety in which she had lived as a child.
So with all this that she's gone through, evidently she was, not, I'm sure the mother loved her, but, back then, who knows, what was going on. How did actually all her ideas come about where, with, modern parenting,
Well,
how did it all switch?
So one thing I'll say, you said her mother loved her, but that's questionable.
Well,
Mother was truly narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
And narcissists love themselves first and foremost. And they, a narcissist actually recently tried to shame me, and I saw it and I named it. And I realized something that I'd been told but never felt, that narcissists have no empathy.
Exactly.
They can feel compassion, but they can't feel empathy. They can't feel another person's experience. So whether she loved her or not, I don't know.
We don't
She probably
know.
loved having a beautiful daughter, but she called Jean ugly. But so you asked an interesting question. How did her ideas come together? So she had had this transcendent experience as a child at camp in Maine. She went to boarding school, typical blue-blooded upper class New York society people. And she had this transcendent experience. So she was always attracted to the jungle. And after her grandmother died, who she'd lived with, and She tried college, flunked out, but she was going to all these, parties with dignitaries and famous people in New York, and her grandmother died. So she decided to go off to Europe, and she did the European tour and all of that. And then she met this Italian count who was going to the jungle, and she talked him into taking her with him because she was drawn to it because of that early experience. And then she made 5 expeditions over a period of the first 10 years. She made 4. She went twice with the Italians, ostensibly to hunt for diamonds. And then she went back to just spend more time with the Yaquana, because she fell in love with these people and their way of life. And so she led the last 3 expeditions. And then the last one was in the late 60s, early 70s. And she went back then to kind of test her ideas. So she never went to study them. She just lived in their villages.
Yeah.
But she had an absolutely genius intellect. And she actually believed that the reason she could see what she saw was because she hadn't had academic training that narrowed her vision. So it's all very interesting. She one time went and met with Margaret Mead, and Margaret Mead called her this unlettered thing and told her she should stop bothering important people. Because by then she'd caught the attention of a lot of muckety mucks, and she was being interviewed. She was actually interviewed by Barbara Walters. You remind me of Barbara Walters a little bit. But anyway, so that's how she came to, she eventually got a book contract. That's when she went back the last time, was to test her ideas. She wrote the book after being writer's blocked for years. And the publishers didn't like it. She'd gotten an advance from 2 publishers and they rejected it. And but she would not change it. They wanted it to be more, they wanted a blonde goes up the Amazon adventure story. And what they got is basically a treatise on human nature.
Exactly.
And they weren't having it. But she said, no, that's the book. I'm not changing it. And she eventually found another publisher. And at this point, it's been translated into 21 languages. It still sells 40 years later. Last time I checked on the Amazon sales thing, it was like number 20,000, which is unheard of for a book that's been around for 40 years and that nobody's marketing. But everybody recommends it to people. Like Gloria Steinem told me when I talked to her, she said, I still give Jean's book to everybody I know who's having a baby. So, and that doesn't count the copies, millions of copies, and that doesn't count how many times it's been handed around.
I can imagine.
It's the kind of book that people share.
So how it was her parenting, from living with those people, in the jungle? How was it different than how we are here?
Well, so it's interesting. There are several principles that she extrapolated. One is that they see their children as perfect. They don't assume that this is going to be a little hellion that needs to be broken and disciplined. Now, that's not so prevalent now, but in the 70s it was, and she was raised in the 40s, and so there wasn't this assumption that the child was going to be a problem. Child rearing was not separate from life. A woman would give birth. By that afternoon, she'd be back to work doing her thing with the baby tied onto her hip in a sling. And the baby stayed there on her body or got handed off to somebody else, sometimes another mom, sometimes a little kid. So they never saw infants as fragile. They didn't see them as incompetent. It was assumed that they would know exactly what to do. So there wasn't even instructional. The kid was there passively observing what his tribal people do. And everybody assumed that he would know and become part of the tribe in the natural way that a child would. So the other thing that's really remarkable is, so a human infant is born prematurely compared to any other mammal. If you think about a horse, it gives birth to a colt. The colt comes out, he's up on 4 legs within half an hour and trotting around the pasture in no time. Human infants are born entirely helpless. We can't walk for, the better part of a year, if that soon. So we need to be close to mother's body. That's our right place. And that's what you read my bio. It's like, those are the missing experiences. So the Yaquana children, they didn't kick and scream. Their bodies were soft and would mold to mother's body. Mom could dance and the baby would be asleep in the sling. Its head never fell off from the dancing. So we treat children like they're very fragile and like they're going to be bad. And one of the examples Jean used to say is that she'd say, when you say, Johnny, be good, what you're basically saying is you're bad.
Bad. Mhm.
Don't fake it. So a lot of it is just in our expectations. That she said expectations really, the child reads our expectations. If you anticipate he's going to act out, and it's in the tone of voice, it's in the
Without a doubt.
disposition.
Mhm.
So part of her parenting, she hated the word parenting, by the way. She was like, you can't turn a noun into a verb. She was like that. But she would say to mothers, never tell the child the same thing twice. You say it once with the total expectation that they'll follow instructions. And if they don't, you go about your business, because they hate to be left out.
It's
Very
just-
interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
that
you
is
see
interesting.
moms saying again and again, do it. I'm going to count to 5, and like she gets more angrier. And every time her voice says, I know you're not going to do it. You're naughty, you're bad, and you're not going to, and I have to force you. She communicates that with her body language and everything. So it's very, moms read her book, or that wasn't really in the book because she hadn't gotten that specific about the parenting so much, but she gave a lot of workshops and stuff. So it's they encounter her work, read her book, and they throw all the other parenting manuals away because it liberates their deep instincts.
Yeah.
So it's like she gives them the green light to do what they know they should do. Like the baby cries, of course you want to pick the baby up.
wanna leave
Just
the
because
baby
some
screaming.
man who's a who's a baby care expert says,
Let him
don't spoil the
cry.
child, let him cry himself to sleep.
Mhm.
And then when the baby cries itself to sleep, they're all, see, the baby didn't cry itself to sleep, it passed out.
Passed out from the crying.
Because the stress of it was too much for its system. So the only safe place was unconscious.
I know.
It's like such a revolution in how we think about it. Now, I was never a mom.
Okay.
Never, chose not to have children, largely because I figured I'd just screw them up. I didn't know,
my God.
like if I had had this information then, if I'd been, if I knew that, I think I could be a great mother now. Of course, I'm no longer fertile. I'm no longer, in that stage of life, but I have this fantasy about being a grandmother. I've also never married. I have my own attachment issues, but, I sometimes imagine getting together with a guy who's got grown children or having children, and I would get to be a grandmother. Like I love that. That's one of my fantasies. But yeah, it's you can see that I'm very passionate about it. It's become my life work, and
It's your life work.
I feel so deeply honored that she passed me the baton.
She passed all this on to
She
you.
gave me, to be able to write this book, and it's getting really rave reviews. Everybody that reads it is like, oh my God, I had no idea if they knew her. And lots of people are talking about it should be made into a movie. It would make a phenomenal movie. So yeah, it's very fulfilling to me. And I have to say, this would not have happened had it not been for the pandemic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, how come?
Well, it was, I had a very busy life, lots of socializing, coming and going. And now all of a sudden we're on lockdown. I'm in one place. And a friend of mine said to me early in the pandemic, early 2020, he said, why haven't you published that book? He'd been a continuum dad, raised his kids this way, and had read an early draft of the book. And he said, why haven't you? So 4th of July in 2020, I said, okay, I'll just put it on KDP, Amazon. I can do that in an afternoon. It doesn't need a fancy cover. I just get it off my to-do list, finally get it done. And I read it. And I was like, oh my God, this is too good. I can't.
You have to do it.
I have to do this justice. And it took a year of, I've never worked so hard in my life figuring out how to publish it. Initially, when I got the Gloria Steinem endorsement, I put that on Facebook, and a publisher from, Simon & Schuster came to me like, when does that happen?
Wow, that's
An
huge.
unknown author gets approached by Simon & Schuster. Ultimately, they chose not to, they passed because Jean's not, Jane Goodall. She's not a household name. So it took many years for me to get around to doing it myself, but I really enjoyed enjoyed as much as you can, a huge challenge doing the publishing and designing it and creating a publishing firm and all that. So I'm very proud of it.
Wow, so you did everything for it.
Yeah. I hired professionals. I had a fabulous book designer, and I had a couple good editors, and I had a lot of help. But even getting the help and finding the help and explaining what I need from the help
takes time.
time consuming, and can be. I learned at some point that I needed to work with people who I'd get off the phone with and feel more energized.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really learned like, oh, these are the people I want to work with, is the people who are going to have fun with me. And, so I was very fortunate to find some of those people.
So let me ask you, what do you like? There's so many new moms out there. What do you feel is the most important thing a new mom would get out of this book?
Carry your baby. Trust your instincts, talk to other moms, find, in whatever way you can, find your village. The nuclear family was a really bad idea. So we have to compensate. We've got play dates, if you can live in a community dynamic someplace. I mean, preschools and that kind of stuff, the Montessori schools, the Waldorf, all that, they're good alternatives. It's the best we can do, because we don't live in the jungle anymore. You got freeways. You can't just let the kid. I mean, the Yaquana moms, their children would climb down cliffs completely confidently. There was nobody looking at them going, be careful. They just assumed that the child would be safe. And we can't necessarily do that now.
No, it's different.
There's so much, we've gone so far with technology and everything that it's difficult. This is one of the big challenges, is trying to translate her work. I work with Scott Noel, who owns her intellectual property rights, and did a brilliant, he did one of the final edits to make sure I got it all right. But he is a continuum dad. He raised two beautiful girls, and he has more of the practical, on the ground insights, really. So I rely on him a lot. I don't do parenting coaching, but I refer people to him when they need that. So really, I think that's the most powerful thing people can get. And in the biography, there's lots of examples. There's a chapter called Continuum Lessons, where I tell some of the stories of what happened when she and I would be sitting there at the Depot Cafe. And there's a whole story where this woman is like losing it with her child. And I would look at her like, what's wrong with this picture? And she would explain it, So it was a beautiful way to start to understand like the application of, because the continuum concept is a theory. It has now been demonstrated by science. William Sears, who wrote the attachment parenting book, he also endorsed the book, but he said that there's all kinds of research now that confirms Jean's theories. So I'm actually going to release a second edition of this with an appendix with all that research. So anyway, I just can talk a blue streak, don't you think?
Oh, no, I'm like intrigued here. That's why I'm not even asking many questions. I'm just letting you take over here, because this is unbelievable. I mean, when I look at, my kids were raised in the 70s when I had them. And I would always pick them up and hold them and rock them to sleep and things like that. And I remember, some of my friends telling me, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Then they're going to get used to it. But that was like just an instinct of mine.
Yeah. Well, this is another interesting thing that I like to explain to people, is that, they'll get used to it. What does that mean? Like, they're going to get dependent on mommy for their good feelings and their safety. Guess what? They need mommy at that stage. They need mommy. Their dependency needs are very real. And if you meet their dependency needs at that stage of life, they naturally grow into independence. Because they get their needs met, eventually they crawl off on their own.
Exactly.
Like, I'm safe in the world. The world is a safe place. I know mommy's going to be there if I need her, so because they're not deprived. This is the thing, again, in my biography, where I say missing experiences and deprivations. That, they didn't get the continuum correct experiences. And in that gap, we adapt. And a lot of those adaptations are now what we call neuroses. Like the attachment issues, attachment styles, or whatever it's called. I've got 4 of them. So, I have insecure,
I'm going to think of what I have. I'm not sure. I'm finally doing the podcast, which is like, I finally said, okay, let's do this, which I
Okay.
was afraid of doing like video. And then I said, what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's just the fears that we all have. And
Yeah.
I feel many of my clients, talk about abandonment,
Yeah.
how their parents were never there for them. And
Yeah.
then it creates so many other issues and
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now with all this technology, with
Yeah.
phones and iPads, and you really wonder, how are these kids going to raise their children?
Yeah. Yeah. And now with masks,
Oh,
there's a whole generation of children that are not learning
don't
to read
see.
faces.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I mean, I don't even want to see what that's going to look like
gonna
in the
be.
future.
Mhm.
The isolation is not good for children. It's like completely, anyway, I don't get me started on that one.
Maybe that's another podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm also, I look at these parents that, they're in the park with the mask, and I'm saying, we're outside. Why are you putting the mask on yourself and the child? They need to see our faces and expressions, and they're not. They're becoming motionless,
And there's
emotionless.
like zero practically chance that you can get it outside. Like somebody would have to sneeze in your face.
Exactly.
Really.
I know.
I have
It's all
teeth marks
fear-based.
in my tongue from not saying something to people. Like,
I look and I say, oh, and I say to myself, oh, what are you doing to this child?
yeah.
They're not seeing what they need to see and feel and experience. But yeah, that's another whole
Yeah, there's going to
podcast.
be a lot of developmental arrest, I
I
think.
think so. I feel so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. Even with adults, they're becoming
Yeah.
desensitized,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's really a shame. But well, where can people get a hold of you and your
Oh,
book?
yeah. So there's different ways.
Uh-huh.
Junglegene.com is the website where you can see the book. You can actually sign up on the email list, and I'll send you the I read the audio first chapter. You get a mini audio book of me reading chapter 1. I also have 2 websites. Well, they're the same website, but 2 URLs. One is easy to remember, the other not so. GeralynGendreau.com, which is a bit of a mouthful, and you have to learn how to spell both names, but Geralyn.us will go to the same site.
Oh, okay.
And, you can get on the email list. You can find out about my different services. I do both writing. I have a writing group for people who are trying to write their book. And then I also do the blind spot coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yes, you're incredible. You're amazing. I tell you, you really are. I'm so happy I found you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
a delight. I mean, this is one of the more unique interviews. I love the places that we went. Your questions were quite provocative. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't ask many, but
well, no, but I tell you, I didn't talk about any of those things that we talked about. Several of those, things that we talked about. I'm excited to share this podcast with my people, because you drew more out of me than the typical podcast host. So thank you very much.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for coming on my show. And I'm honored, and I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah,
believe me, I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah.
So
do you read on a tablet?
No.
Oh, me neither. Okay, because now,
as you can see behind me,
right? Yeah. No, well then.
I need the book. I have to feel it.
Same way. Yeah. If it's not wood pulp, it's not a book.
There's more energy in holding it than the tablet.
Exactly.
But I mean, of course, if I'm on a plane or in a car or thing like that, I'm not going to bring a whole bunch of books with me. I'll put it on a tablet. But I love the feel of a book.
Yeah, me too. So you can get hardcover or softcover on Amazon. There's also the electronic version, but you're like me, like I spend enough time.
I gotta have the real thing.
I don't want to go and sit in bed with a screen. I want a book in my hand. So
no, it's too bright, the screen, and then I'm up all night.
So be sure you write an Amazon review. Those reviews are important for.
Oh yes, I will. Believe me, and just thank you for coming on. Just say your website one more time.
Geralyn.us or geralyngendreau.com or junglegene.com. And I think you'll put it in the show notes.
Oh,
Probably.
believe me, I will.
They don't have show notes on Spotify. Anyway.
Well, no, I put the on my YouTube, I put everyone's their bio.
Yeah.
With
Wonderful.
where they can get in touch, because I feel it's important. That's why I'm doing this, to, connect other people.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. It's connections and having a good time doing it.
Yeah.
And I thank you again so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Barbara.
So, I want to thank all of my listeners for listening today, and again, a very big thank you to my guest, Geralyn. And I hope that you heard what you needed to hear. So again, thank you for listening, and visit me at motivateyourlife.net. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, the Spiritual Warrior Coach Podcast. And I also have another channel, Barbara Savin, where I have some meditations and grounding and some other things for you to listen to. So, please like both of them and subscribe. And anyone that is maybe interested in learning about energy healing, check out my book on Amazon, Gentle Energy Touch, The Beginner's Guide to Hands-on Healing. Again, visit me at motivateyourlife.net. Thank you for listening, and have a beautiful week filled with love and with light. Love, Barbara.
Thank you for listening to the Spiritual Warrior Coach podcast. My guest today was Geralyn Gendreau. And for more information about Geralyn, visit her website at www.junglegene.com. Please like and subscribe to this channel, the Spiritual Warrior Coach podcast. Have a beautiful day filled with love and light. Love, Barbara.